Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign in real time so that you can see all the steps and thought processes and questions and concerns that go into creating a full blown campaign using my system, my methodology. I'm RJ Kerr, I'm your host as always, and today we're going to be picking up where we left off last time. We are going to be working on creating a unique monster stat block for our campaign here. It's our swarm of commoners to simulate effectively an angry mob that might attack the characters depending on some of their choices in the Sea Shanty Siren, which is a mouthful, and I kind of like it that way. Sea Shanty Siren adventure. Uh, so before we do that, though, if you are joining us for the very first time or you haven't watched all the previous episodes of the series, uh, let me get you caught up. So you're not lost. As I said, we are working on a completely custom campaign, completely from scratch. It's got its own unique domain of dread in it. And we've already done a lot of work on that. We've kind of figured out what structure we want to use. We're using a story circle structure on this to kind of loosely guide our narrative arc here so that we have some rise and fall and add some high tension moments, some lower tension moments, that kind of deal, so that we can create a really dynamic story across the breadth of the campaign. We have also figured out where our adventure starts, how our characters enter this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We've talked about what kind of personal motivations would draw them through that portal. We figured out where they're going to land in a shanty town that we call Darkport, which sits on the edge of an inland sea. And that all of that inland sea is a big part of this domain of dread. We have figured out that it used to be the basin of a thriving metropolis that's now fallen into ruin and has become flooded. We have determined that there is an elemental evil in this domain of dread that serves as the Dreadlord, Ovander, and we're still figuring out exactly how he fits into the grand scheme of things. Uh, we have created our very first adventure where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape captivity, and in doing so, learn about the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielders some power over the domain of dread, and learn that this is probably their best bet for getting out of here alive. And now we're working on a larger section of the campaign that's a little more it's a little more proactive. The characters have a lot of choices and a lot of agency in this, and that's what we want. We want them to be able to go out into the world and do some world building and or some exploration of our world building, and really get a feel for this domain of dread at their own pace and is, guided by their own decisions. And so we're using a node story structure for that. And effectively, what that is we have nodes, which I prefer to call investigative scenes, where there are various clues that are scattered about there. The characters have the opportunity to discover, which lead them to other investigative scenes, and so on and so forth, until they discover the answer to their mystery. In this case, the location of the artifact of this artifact. Uh, this gives our characters a lot of agency because they can pick and choose what clues they want to follow. They cannot find all the clues and still succeed. So they can move here and there and all over the world and still find their way to the ultimate solution. And that gives us a little bit of structure so that we aren't having to create everything completely off the cuff, completely on the fly. And we've got some adventures prepared in the form of these investigative scenes. So we built a few of those out using various adventure structures, and now we're working on one that's a sort of a complex social encounter. It has less to do with mechanics and more to do with the interaction between NPCs, their personalities. And so we spent a fair amount of time building out those personalities so that we, as DMs, have a nice clear view of the kinds of choices that those important NPCs would make when they're interacting with the characters, making it a lot easier to run these very dynamic social encounter scenes. Uh, Now, one of the things that we've worked on there are some setbacks to make this situation a little more complicated than just a couple simple persuasion checks or intimidation checks or deception checks or what have you. And so we've added some complications to success, some hurdles that the characters have to overcome when they're successful, and to ultimately get the reward that they're after. So, as part of that, we are building out an angry mob in the form of our swarm of commoners stat block. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to continue building that out. So it's a creature that we can use and run pretty simply in combat, and really give kind of the flavor of what we want to achieve in this situation. As always, this is an interactive stream, so please feel free to jump in the chat with your questions, comments, concerns, ideas, thoughts, opinions, or anything else you really want to talk about while we do this. You guys come up with some amazing stuff and you ask some really insightful questions. So I love hearing from you. Let's see here. Uh, we've already got a comment here from Jonathan Frost says, not all those that get trapped in this domain of dread are lost. Is that what I heard? Well, they can't all be lost because the characters have to be able to get out, right? So maybe nobody's escaped yet, but there's got to be a way out using this artifact, or else there's no mission to accomplish. There's no overarching objective. Um, Also, before we continue on, before I forget, last time, I think it was last time, Mr. Mex asked where in the Let's Write an Adventure sequence this campaign arc begins. And I didn't have an answer for you. I've got one now. It is episode 29 is where this campaign begins. And I have gone ahead and created a playlist on my YouTube channel that's just this campaign, so you can start from the beginning and get caught up without going through the first adventure that we ever wrote in this series. Okay, so with that all out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our swarm of commoners. Um, we've done a little work on this, very little work on this, kind of figuring out the size of this swarm. Basic alignment. We've done some simple things like coming up with the resistances that are typical to swarms, immunities that are typical to swarms, and simply we've gotten this from looking up swarm stat blocks that already exist and kind of pulling that where it makes sense. Um, most swarms don't speak a language. In this case, they would. They're commoners, so we can keep that on there. Their passive perception commoner stat blocks are 10 across the board here, right? So we might adjust that a little bit to represent kind of the strength and the perceptiveness of a group of people. We may adjust some of these stats as well to reflect that. But some of that's going to come down to what our expected challenge rating is, um, and that'll determine some of these. So before we get into kind of the hardcore math of this, we were also working on some of the features and traits that exist in our that exist in our swarm that make it unique. And we'd come up with a couple ideas. One, we went with the standard swarm trait. The swarm can occupy another creature's space, and vice versa. The swarm can move through any opening large enough for, in this case, a medium-sized creature, and the swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. Pretty standard stuff. But then you guys came up with the idea of this lost in the crowd mechanic, where if somebody goes down in front of this swarm and the swarm occupies their space, they could perhaps be carried off, maybe even be restrained and moved away, cycled to the back of the swarm, uh, or moved with the swarm. And so that's a really cool mechanic, I think. So something we want to add here. And then we also had this crowd press idea, which may or may not be a trait. It may end up being an action. We might move it down there. But this idea that it's just sort of the weight of this swarm of this wall of people could push adventurers back. Instead of enveloping their space, they could knock them back and force them out of the potentially force them to move backward or retreat. So let's start on this lost in the crowd mechanic. And so let's say for this, Um, Jonathan Frost says Swarm of Commoners gives me World War Z vibes. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about any kind of riot or angry mob or that kind of deal. I'm kind of personally the way I envision them is like the torches and pitchforks kind of mob that that chased Frankenstein's monster, you know that kind of thing. But the World War Z reference is not uh, is plenty apropos. Um, so this lost in the crowd. So let's say that um, uh, if the if the swarm enters the space of a prone character, and I think we just want to go with prone. I'm going to say creature actually. Prone creature um, of I'd say medium size or smaller. And I think we want to do prone instead of dropped to 0 hit points because I think it'll be a little more useful then. And the idea too could be you get knocked down and then the swarm envelops you, and now you're still alive and trying to kind of fight them off, um, sort of playing into that some of the horror of that. So the swarm enters the space of a prone creature of medium size or smaller. Um, the um, yeah, then that creature must make a DC XX strength saving throw or become restrained. While restrained in this fashion, the swarm can move the target creature without any penalty to movement speed. And we're going to say escape DC XX. I might even say that additionally, while restrained, the target creature has disadvantage on strength checks to escape. And I like the idea of putting has disadvantage on there because again it kind of I think that lends itself to kind of once you're kind of swallowed by the swarm, well, you're lost in the crowd here. You get all these hands on you, people holding on to you. It's kind of once you're caught, it's got to be a lot harder to escape. Um, and we'll figure out what that DC is going to be when we figure out our proposed challenge rating and that kind of deal for this. Okay, looks like we had a couple other comments. Or it says, "Embrace the swarm, accept it." Yes, yes. Don't fight against the swarm. It is inevitable. And then, Worth mentions trampled, maybe non-lethal damage to some degree. I like that as an attack, or as an action option here. I think that's a really cool one. So let's do. Let's add that in here. And I'm going to say trample. We'll call this one torches and pitchforks. And I think the more I think about it, I think that crowd press probably is an action as opposed to a um, trait. So let's move that down here. Then let's go ahead and say multi-attack. I'll put TBD on there because they should be able to do some combination of these things on a turn here. You know, we can say one target on, for example, trample. We might say one target with the prone condition. And we would change this probably to bludgeoning damage. Do that. And we change that to 0. Change that one to 0 as well. Let's see. And then we'll figure out what crowd press does. It's let me go ahead and get that rid of here. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says, surprised Ghostfire Gaming hasn't given a stat block for this. This is such a grimdark kind of creature. Yeah, it is. And I'll be honest with you, I've not done a whole lot of deep dives into Ghostfire Gaming's stuff. Although it certainly looks interesting, and I really love kind of the I've been reading a little bit about. I think it's their corruption mechanic that they have in there, and that sounds pretty interesting to me. So I'll have to check that out. Okay, so and then well-made RG. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so crown press. Let's see here. Let's do this. We're going to make it an attack of sorts, but we're going to make the range 5 feet, and the hit. You know what? We don't want to make it to hit. We want to make this a DC. DC saving throw. So we want to make this a saving throw because the idea is kind of being pushed back or maybe even knocked prone, especially since they have the option to knock them prone since we have a lot of conditions that affect prone creatures in this. So crown press should be able to knock down potential opponents. You know, actually, the more I think about it, now that I reconsider here, I think it should be a passive trait. So let's put that here, because the way I'm thinking about it right now, and I've kind of thought this over a little deeper, is that it's more of a, creatures within 5 feet of the swarm have to make this saving throw at the end of, maybe at the end of their turn or, at probably during the swarm's turn. So yeah, probably during the swarm's turn. Let's think about that. Okay, so at the beginning of the swarm's turn, all creatures of medium size or smaller must make a DC X strength saving throw. On a failure, actually, they've kind of switched the nomenclature in 2024 instead of just doing failure, which is kind of nice. Let's see here. Failure. The target creature is either knocked prone or pushed back, we'll say 10 feet. So DM's choice is either pushed back or knocked prone. Okay. We'll say success. The crown press has no effect on the target. Cool. Yeah, so it becomes kind of a passive thing here. I kind of like the idea of it kind of being able to kind of mow down people who are opposing this angry mob. Especially because if you knock them prone, then they can either kind of trample you, or you can do the lost in the crowd thing, or frankly, you can probably do both of them potentially. And so it gives, it makes this kind of a condition focused creature. They're trying to take down somebody. So, all right. I like the synergy of that. I like the synergy of that. Looks like we've got a bunch of comments while I was chattering away here to myself. Ben Elder says, since this is the religious town, an effect could be set into motion. The lady's ire, a mist envelops the town, reducing perception, giving disadvantage to attacks for the party, but not her faithful. That could be a cool sort of encounter-specific mechanic that we could work in there. Yeah. It could be something that that the acolyte calls down at the beginning of their on their first turn in this kind of combat or chase or whatever it becomes. Jonathan Frost says, well, you know what, before we move on, let me capture that idea. That's a good idea, Ben. Because I will keep going and then just move on. So I'm going to say, we're going to put brackets here. I'm going to say ladies ire missed to remind ourselves about this. And then come back to our more commenters here. Okay, so then Jonathan Frost says, if the victim is fighting against the strength of the crowd, should there be a strength increase per overall size? Huge, gargantuan, colossal. Yeah, we're going to want to adjust these ability scores for sure. We're not going to want to base them off of just the pure commoner because they are kind of fighting with the overall might of the group is what we want them to feel. And so, yeah, I foresee there being a fairly large adjustment to the strength here for sure. Yeah, let's see. Yep. Hello. Hey, Mr. Mex. Glad you made it. If you just got here, Mr. Mex, I don't know if you heard, you probably didn't hear, but at the beginning of the stream, I mentioned that last time you had asked the question of where in the Let's Write an Adventure series this campaign begins, and it's episode 29. Also, for your convenience, I've gone ahead and made a playlist that is just this campaign development, so you can start from the beginning and watch all those episodes at your leisure. Let's see here. Ross says, "Hey, Mr. Mex holds off Mr. Mex's work so he can enjoy the stream." Yeah. Yeah. Or it says to tell work you have a team building meeting or something. Yeah, yeah. You have a team building meeting that's going to focus on conflict resolution and collaborative solutions, right? You know, put that on your resume as a D&D player. Um, uh, you know, if you publish anything on like the DMs Guild and make any kind of money, like even a dollar, you're technically a professional game developer. So put that on your resumes. Okay, so cool. Let's define the multi attack. Let's say ooh, the swarm makes 2 attacks. One, say, torches and pitchforks. Attack. And 1 trample attack if able. And we might adjust that. We might do more than this based on how the damage shakes out for this. And yeah. Let's see here. Mr. Mex says, "Damn, my resume just got extra fluffed up and can also add consultant to it." Yeah, exactly. You know, you're doing work. It's not paid work, but you're doing work. You know. All right. So we kind of have the basic shape of what we're trying to create here, kind of crafted out. And so now uh, the so now I think we're going to want to get into some of the math of this, and um, I am still a big fan of the 2014 DMG designer notes for creating custom creatures. Um, I think it does a pretty good job, especially even in the 2024 editions, and we can smooth that out with some 2024 considerations as we go. But I think it's just a good place to start. I feel. And so we're gonna pull that up on D&D Beyond, and we're gonna kind of work through that. In the meantime, though, Orth says, "Why does the swarm not throw rotten vegetables and fruit at the PCs?" Hmm. Hmm. See, we're gonna have to adjust this multi attack because that is a cool idea. Um, let's say rotten tomatoes. We'll say 1 target creature within. Actually, I should say the swarm targets 1 creature within, say, 20 feet, because that kind of aligns with some of the thrown, some of the thrown weapons here. Swarm targets 1 creature within 20 feet. That creature must make a DC X dexterity saving throw or become blinded until the end of their next turn. And yeah, so looking at the chat here, the rotten vegetables, that kind of deal. And Jonathan Ross mentions creates a sickened or poisoned condition. We could go with that. I was kind of thinking that it like you get pelted in the face, and this rotten tomato is kind of covers your eyes and your vision, and you've got to on your turn kind of wipe that away, and so you end up with one turn of being blinded, which may limit what you can do. Um, it's kind of how I view it. We could certainly go with the poison condition, um, but there aren't as many monsters that cause the blind, um, that cause the blinded condition, as there are that cause the poison condition. And so consequently, characters are less prepared to handle blinded and deafened than they are poisoned. At least in my experience, they tend to be. Um, but yeah, yeah. At least so that's kind of my take on it. It's one of the things I would focus on the blinded on this too. Plus, I just think that narratively, when you're telling this, you're describing this action. Suddenly you get pelted in the face with a tomato, it explodes, and it explodes, occluding your vision as you try not to retch. Um, the um, yeah, so that's kind of where I would go with this personally. Um, but there's nothing wrong with doing the poison condition for that, sure, for sure. Um, Orth says the swarm is going to be final boss strong when we are done with it. Yeah, so something to consider um, with when you're making monsters or making creatures of any stat block to that point is that at the beginning, don't limit yourself to what you think fits into the challenge rating. Kind of lean into the flavor of the creature and what you're trying to create here, because we can always go back and chisel away at this. We can always make the damage lower. We can always make the DC lower or higher or whatever we need, so that the so that we can kind of smooth it out to whatever the challenge rating we're trying to hit is. Um, but there's nothing wrong with kind of dull, just kind of dumping this on the sheet right away, and then carving it back later as you go. Um, just FYI, I know that we're at our normal time here, but I kind of figured that since we didn't do a Monday stream, we could go a little bit longer today. So if you guys are cool with that, we'll go ahead and continue on. Um, let's see here. A couple other ideas in here. Mr. Mex says thrown items create difficult terrain. Um, yeah, I could see that here. Um, I don't. Um, I don't know if that would be universal to a swarm of commoners, though, right? That they would be throwing stuff. We might. Um, hmm. Well, there's nothing wrong with making um, some specialty sorts of things, some things that occur in unique situations. Um, we could say we could come up with the riot trait. And we don't want to come up with too many traits, but we could say, let's see here, the area around the swarm is within we should say the area within the 10 feet of the swarm is considered difficult terrain. Whenever the swarm encounters um, movable obstacles to represent um, um, obstructions and debris being thrown out of the way. Kind of niche, right? Um, yeah, yeah. So that it's kind of niche. Um, so it won't get used all the time, but it's an interesting idea to do that because you're right. There's a lot of kind of stuff that kind of happens when you get a crowd of people together like this, and if they're just kind of marching down the street, yeah, they're unlikely to be tossing chairs and stuff like that. But if this breaks out inside of like a tavern or something, 100% they'd be throwing chairs and tables and all that kind of stuff, and we can have that mechanic in there to account for that kind of deal. So cool idea. Cool idea. Ben Elder says maybe a to the pyre mechanic. The mob can attempt to grapple and restrain a PC to bring them to the stake. If they manage to bring a PC um, to a certain area, the pyre is lit and they take 10d6 fire damage. Um, so yeah, so again, with that one, that's very specific to the situation that we're building these for. And so I tend to want to make a monster stat block or a creature stat block that's it's a little more generic than that, so I can use it in other situations too. But I like the the mechanic of them wanting to kind of take these characters to the stake and burn them. And so let's add that to the encounter. Um, and let's put another to the pyre on here. Because we'll build that out for this specific encounter. Um, this is going to be a fun combat encounter. When I run this, I'm going to almost beg my players to go talk to the priest. um, and uh, Yeah. So, all right. So let's read down the chat here real quick. Yeah. So we'll figure out what the damage is. There's some guidelines in the new DMG about starting your turn in a fire and how much damage it does. And let's see here. So Ben Elders says per turn or until they're rescued, damages their bonds. Absolutely. Ben Elders says pelted with rotten vegetables gives disadvantage on charisma actions. Yeah. Yeah. I've done that before. After Bloody Fight, if the characters don't go to an inn and clean up or something like that, then they have disadvantage because they're all spattered in blood on charisma checks. Let's see here. Let's see. I'll get points to energy. Crivens, McGee, how is that sequence of events likely to play out? Okay, so um, we are in a situation where the characters are tasked by a nefarious sort of siren who has lost her voice to acquire a new voice for her, and that means convincing somebody else um, to give up their voice. And she's come up with a short list of characters or a short list of NPCs that have a suitable voice from her point of view. So we have this bard, we have this priest, and we have a widow. And we've given them dilemmas, reasons why they may or may not want to give up their voice, as well as a number of other character traits. But what we're working on right now is to keep this social encounter from just devolving into a series of of charisma checks effectively. We're coming up with some challenges that come out of success. So when the characters succeed in getting their convincing somebody to give up their voice, and so they can return it, so they can give it to the siren, uh, that there's some hurdle they have to overcome after that. And so we're creating some encounters that happen if they're successful based off of who they're working with. So like the bard here is more of a straightforward, a little twist to it there, but it's more of a kind of your standard sort of combat encounter where a group of local thugs try to get the bard's voice back. Um, the priest one that we're working on right now is the idea that the priest's acolyte becomes aware of this bargain and decides that PCs are doing the work of this domain of dread's devil, Evander. Um, and I don't mean mechanically a devil; he's an elemental evil as opposed to a fiend. But that's the perspective. And therefore the characters have to be stopped. And so he raises an angry mom to confront the PCs and attempts to have them burned at the stake. And so we're coming up with some mechanics that would kind of make this a really dynamic sort of almost escape encounter because I yes the players could decide their characters are going to stay and fight this village, this town in its entirety, um, but they're more likely, I think, than we construct this to try to be getting away. And so, to your question on how the sequence of events is likely to shake out, is that we have this angry mob led by this acolyte. Um, the 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 idea is they'd be pursuing the PCs, and so we've developed the swarm of commoners. It's effectively, it's an angry mob, right? And given them kind of some abilities to knock people down and drag them off and that sort of thing, and carry them away. And so by building this unique to the pyre sort of mechanic into this encounter, it gives them a place to drag PCs off to. Is the kind of their goal. Um, so we're still polishing exactly how it's going to work out. That's kind of the part of the creative process here, but that's sort of what I'm envisioning. Hopefully that answers your question, Crivens. Mr. Mex says this is the future in our Tomb of Annihilation game, fellas. I mean, don't give me any ideas, Mr. Mex. Um, um, and then Ben Elder says, I hope to run this one day for my group. And if they try to correct me on anything about the world or lore, I can bust out. Do not speak to me of the deep magic cur. I was there when it was written. Awesome. Awesome. And then Mr. Rex says this is going to be mail available for purchase or something. Yeah, at the end of when we finish this, I really would like to format it and so we can distribute it. And really, I would like to come up with a way to just kind of give it to viewers like you all who have really kind of put your heart and soul into this. And so we'll figure out how realistically I can do that. But then for other people, it would be um, um, the for other people, it'd probably be a paid kind of thing. Let's see here. Crippen says, sounds like carrying into the pyre will necessitate a combat. Party could put out the fire. How will the crowd react? Yeah, we want to make sure that it's open ended enough that there's lots of options for the characters. Um, the the idea being that yeah, if they can come up with a way to put out this fire, fantastic. It gives them another opportunity to escape. Odds are not every one of the PCs are going to be overcome by this mob here. Um, it's going to be a few of them that get hauled off, and the other ones have to kind of give up their chance to. Well, the other ones would be encouraged in that situation to give up their chance to escape, to go back and save their friends. Although they can certainly decide to just kind of abandon their party mates to their potential demise. Um, and so, I'm not a huge fan of kind of micromanaging how each encounter is going to play out. Instead, just kind of defining some of the rough mechanics here and giving myself some tools to play with and coming up with some of the more fringe kind of things on the fly as we go. Um, so, as part of the pyro mechanic, we'll probably come up with suggested ways the fire could be put out. Um, you know, calling in a storm or create water or something like that, or some other suitable solution. And those will guide us in how much have they done enough to put out a flaming pyre. How long does it take the pyre to get lit and start burning? Because obviously they're not going to light it before they put the PCs on it. That would be weird. Uh, that would be the angry mobs sacrificing themselves to the pyre as well. Um, so that's kind of my thought process on that. And so we'll work on all of that on the to the pyre mechanic when we come back to that. Um, and so let's continue building out our swarm of commoners here. Let's see. Another question. Do Trickery Domain clerics get counterspell? Could raise the stakes. The priest really wants the pyre to stay lit. That's a really good question. Let's look that up. I don't think they get counterspell. I'm pretty sure that's a straight arcane spell, but let's double check because things have been shaken up in the 2024, which I think shaken up for the better. Personally, that's my point of view on it. And let's see. So I'm just on D&D Beyond another screen here. Obviously, for intellectual property reasons, I am not going to, show that on screen here. But it looks like nope. It is not something that any cleric or cleric subclass would get. It seems limited to sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and then a couple paladin oaths have access to it. So let's see here. Mr. Mex's party members just Bugs Bunny blow out the torch with the Gus Speller mage. We laugh about that, but honestly, that comes down to the kind of game that you're playing, right? Like we're writing this as grim, dark horror, and it's a world where everything's kind of oppressive and sad, and we're gonna want to put some levity in there in particular spots when we run this adventure because if everything's always a grind, your players are going to kind of get used to that and immune to that, and so they're not going to feel the high tension moments anymore. So working in little bits of comical levity, like they use gust of wind and they blow out the torch that they the one of the commoners or the acolyte is still trying to light the pyre, and every time somebody casts gust of wind and it blows it out, and they got to relight the torch, and then they try to relight the pyre, and just having that sequence. It is inherently comical, and it can kind of break some of the stress of this, so that when you do another stressful situation later, your players really feel that emotional arc. So yeah, go off, have fun with it. Let's see. Um, Criven says Big B's squashing foot. Yeah, 100%. If somebody casts Big B's hand on this one, I would totally let them, snuff out the fire with that. Like pinching a candle out. Why not? Why not? And then Mr. Rick says, "I know my group." Yeah, and then Ben Oler says, "Bucket salesman finally has his time to shine." You know, but again, you could work in a silly reoccurring NPC that does things like sells buckets. I ran a homebrew campaign for a while that took place in my version of Sigil, where I made a lot of modifications to it, because I had this whole kind of Spelljammer aligned vision for it, and I had a reoccurring NPC in there whenever the characters went to various markets. That it was just some dude who sold wet hats. They were always damp, and it's a stupid, ridiculous gag that wouldn't be funny to anybody else, but because it was a recurring gag in the campaign, my players started looking for the damp hat man whenever they went to any sort of market, and it was a great way again to kind of break the stress of some of the heavier topics we were talking about in the various arcs there. So yeah, work bucket salesman into your campaign. Why not? Cool. Um, Mr. Mex says minor illusion of giant marshmallow. Absolutely. Absolutely. We're gonna laugh ourselves into not getting anything more done in this today, which is not a problem, but these are all good. Okay, so let's go to Let's see here. Let's find the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. And pull that bad boy up. And go to Chapter 9, Creating a Monster. Mr. Criven says, stay puff, Marshmallow Man. I always want to do marshmallow golems in a campaign. Historically, I run a holiday one shot around the Christmas time frame for my friends, and I haven't done marshmallow golems yet, but I just might make them especially flammable so that fire attacks light them on fire, and now they're burning marshmallows, and they can they can smash sticky fists into into their opponents. Jonathan Francis, hot cocoa quasi elementals. Yeah, 100%, 100%. Okay, so anyway, so I've got the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide up in Chapter 9, Create a Monster, which has got a whole table to kind of help you balance kind of the damages and the DCs. And I consider them a rough guide. They're a little bit loose, but they are a great place to jump off from. That being said, I'm getting ahead of myself. And we do want to pull up the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide because I think it does a better I think it does a better job of balancing encounters. So we're going to be using that as a guideline under the Chapter 4 Creating Adventures Combat Encounters section there. I think it's a little more straightforward. I think it's a little more accurate to the difficulty. So I like that one a little bit better. It's a little more in line with the stuff in Xanathar's too, so that works as well. Let's see here. Crivens McGee says this needs a whole new Icewind Dale campaign. Yeah, this Save Santa version of Icewind Dale, or Santa as the Dread Lord of Icewind Dale. Maybe Krampus would be more in line with that. Still, we could flip the script and make Krampus the good guy and Santa the bad guy. Why not? Mr. Mex says, is there a countdown mechanic for if the pirate does get lit? Yeah, 100%. So we would keep it pretty simple for that, I think. Personally, what I would do is part of that to the pyro mechanic. I would say, that effectively, once the pyre is lit, it takes X number of turns before it's high enough to cause damage to characters at the stake. And I pull 3 turns out of my just kind of out of the air on that. And so I would put that kind of number in there. I wouldn't worry about making it any more complicated than that because, to be honest, I would run this situation in initiative order anyway, because it's either going to be a chase or it's going to be combat or it's going to be a mixture of the above. And all of those are run in initiative order. It just makes it a little bit easier. And so it's easy to count rounds and keep track of time that way. As opposed to doing something like a progress clock, which is more useful if you're trying to track an event over a longer period of time. Let's see here. Ben Elder says, I had a warlock pact of the old one whose cult was obsessed with coffee, trying to find the perfect drink to awaken their patron, the sleeper. His name, Americano. Their rivals were tea-drinking monks. Ben says, sorry, slightly off topic. Just remembered the character when you said about the wet hat guy. Yeah. You know, again, you can do fun stuff. I played in uh, uh, a 90s themed uh, D&D campaign at one point where um, one of the players in our group, she was playing a warlock who was um, it was effectively their pact was with the head of an MLM, so a multi-level marketing scheme that was about setting up yoga studios, and so uh, she spent the whole campaign trying to convince people to open up yoga studio franchises and to do yoga with her. And so there was a whole mechanic that she had to get so many people doing yoga with her over the course of over a week, or else there would be repercussions from her patron. And if she exceeded that number, she got boons from her patron, that kind of thing. So um, it yeah, I mean, you can do fun stuff with this. Why not? We can do anything you want, anything you can imagine. That's the cool thing about this game. Um, all right, we're getting uh, to the end of our time here, so I want to achieve one more thing before we move on. I want to figure out what the balance is on this encounter. So we can figure out what the target AC is, or the target CR is, challenge rating is. So um, I'm just going to make a quick thing here. Since this, we don't know entirely when our characters are going to get here. So this is a loose guess, but this is one of our first tier investigative scenes. And so they're likely to be a lower level when they get here. So probably second level um, when they do this one. So we're going to balance it for second level, and we may end up um, having to massage it later on to turn it into a third level encounter, something along those lines. But this is for our rough numbers here. So if we want to make this a low difficulty, a moderate difficulty, or a high difficulty sort of encounter, I kind of see this as becoming a high difficulty sort of encounter here. Um, so uh, the so let's work with that. So that means that if we're planning on about 4 PCs, then we're looking at a. Now we're going to want to do a selection of them. So we're going to say low. They use, I guess we'll stick with their nomenclature, moderate and high. And so, because the ghost confrontation is likely to be. I'll have to double check the CR on that, but it's likely to be, low or medium or somewhere in that range there. We'll figure out what the thugs are, and then we'll use high for this angry mob. So high is going to be 800 XP is our budget for a group of 4 second level adventurers. Moderate is going to be 600 XP, and then low is going to be 400 XP for a group of 4 second level adventurers. So we at least have our budget for that as we go. The That'll help guide us when we kind of are picking a target CR we want to work with for this angry mob. Yeah, we'll pick up from there on Friday. Fantastic. Last few comments here before we sign off. Jonathan Ross says, Ben Aller, the answer is Cuban coffee. It's like rocket fuel. Yeah. And then Mr. Mex says, how difficult is it to change a setting to something more modern / realistic times? Could that be something covered in a future stream? Yeah, absolutely. It's not that hard, to be honest with you. It's not terribly difficult. The question is how you manage magic and that kind of thing. But you can come up with, creative solutions, or just remove magic from the game. The mechanics still hold up in a lot of different ways, but there are some modifications to make. Yeah, so fantastic. So yeah, but we can talk about that in a future stream for sure. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the hero's journey. We've got a nicely growing list of things to address. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I had an absolute blast working on this with you. I'm glad we could run a little bit longer. As always, if you've enjoyed the stream, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow, gets more people into the chat here, and keeps it the dynamic, fun experience that it was tonight. If you ever want to jump into one of my games, as many of you already are, you can find my current open games at startplaying.games slash GM slash RJ Kerr. And then there's also a button in there to request a custom game. So if you want something that's a little more homebrew, or there's a module you want to run that I don't have posted, or there's a different time that you want to play, or something along those lines, click that button. It doesn't, lock you into anything in particular. It gives us the opportunity to kind of have that conversation and figure out what we can do for you. So, anyway, thank you again, everybody, for such a great stream, and I will see you all on Friday night. Talk to you then. Bye now.